Tajdelek, welcome to Tibettv. I'm Yishtawa. In today's edition of Introducing Tibet Support Groups, we will discuss about Australia-Tibet Council based in Australia. Australia-Tibet Council is a non-profit organization certified by the Australian government as a registered charity and funded by members across Australia. It was founded in 1988 and is the largest community of Australians standing in solidarity with the people of Tibet. To discuss more, I'm joined by Dr. Zoë Bedford, Executive Officer of the organization. Welcome to Tibettv, Dr. Zoë.
Thank you very much, Yeshi. Lovely to be here.
Dr. Zoë, first of all, would you tell our viewers about Australia-Tibet Council and when and how did it come into existence?
Okay, yeah. ATC, Australia-Tibet Council, was founded in 1998 by a small group of dedicated activists who were deeply affected by the protests on the streets of Lhasa that occurred that year and the year before. At the time, there was only a small amount of Tibetans living in Australia, and so the people who founded the Australia-Tibet Council were Australians who, some of them were interested in Tibetan Buddhism and had been involved in Buddhist centres in Australia, and others were, human rights advocates who wanted to make an organisation dedicated to amplifying the concerns of Tibetans in Tibet and exposing the human rights violations in China. Now, over the years, the Tibetan community in Australia has grown, and ATC is really proud to work together with the Tibetan community on campaign issues and rallies. ATC remains the largest Tibet support group in Australia with an email list of around 16,000 supporters, and last year alone our Facebook posts reached an audience of around 700,000 people. And we're really proud to now be at 33 years of standing in solidarity and supporting the people of Tibet, and we'll stay as long as the struggle is going on.
Okay, Dr. Zoë, since your organization is the largest Tibet support group in Australia, and I found that your organization's vision is a free Tibet. So how does your organization work on it, and what are the major activities?
Sure. Our vision is a free Tibet in which Tibetans can determine their own future and freely pursue their cultural, political and economic development themselves. We're inspired by Tibetans who have resisted China's occupation in their homeland with courage and hope and tenacity. We believe the spirit of resistance is alive and strong in Tibet, and our organisation wants to do all we can to support Tibetans standing up for their rights and freedoms. We work with members of the Australian government to make effective motions for Tibet, to push for China's human rights record in Tibet to be consideration when Australia is dealing with Chinese officials, and to make sure politicians in Australia take a stand and have a strong voice for the issues affecting Tibetan people. We mobilise support in Australia. As stated before, we've got supporters, and we provide opportunities for them to be involved in campaigns and to take action on issues that they feel are important that are affecting the lives of Tibetans in Tibet. We're working on policies that we hope will have a positive effect, obviously, on Tibetans, such as the reciprocal access bill. We're trying to get that through, which would open Tibet back up and mean that Australians might be able to visit Tibet, such as diplomats and journalists, and also, though very importantly, Australian Tibetans might be able to visit their homeland and their families, and while there, witness with their own eyes the issues and what's going on in Tibet. We strongly believe in the value of coordinated international campaigns, and we're pleased to join with other TSGs like ICT or ITN, and we feel like being coordinated and strategic in our campaigning just strengthens the movement. So currently we're joining with ITN in the Winter Olympics 2022 campaign. And just, because it's always good to talk about wins, we've had a few wins in Australia recently with the New South Wales Department of Education reviewing the role of Confucius Institutes in our classrooms in Australia. And subsequently, they've ended their contract with the Chinese government. And also, along the same line, two popular newspapers in Australia, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, where we we managed to get them to close down a deal with China where they were going to enclose a Chinese propaganda insert called China Watch into their papers. And so, we work in a number of areas, dealing with China's soft power propaganda influence in Australia, political advocacy, highlighting the human rights abuses and situations for Tibet, on the environment, all these issues come under our campaign banner.
Okay, Dr. Zoë, as you said that there are lots of pressures from Chinese government when you work for the cause of Tibet. The question is, in recent years, we have seen many of the Tibet advocacy and campaign activities being disrupted by some individuals in Australia. So it is highly likely that your organization's activities often get disrupted as well. So how strong do you feel is the pressure from Chinese government is present in your country? Tell us some instances of challenges that you faced in that area of advocacy.
Sure, yeah. The Australian Tibet Council actually released a report about this called Australian Silence on Tibet, How China is Shaping Our Agenda, which is available on our webpage. And it's about talking about the undue influence of China in our political system and the problem that it has become. And in 2020, representatives from the Australian Tibet Council and the Tibetan community participated in a parliamentary inquiry, which was about the issues that the diaspora community face in terms of being monitored and having surveillance by the Chinese government, the intimidation of family members, Tibetans, and the pressure put on Tibetans in Australia. So we raised that issue directly in Parliament in late 2020. We've seen instances where supporters of the Chinese government have arrived at our rallies and held their own counter rallies, sometimes violently, attacking people, especially around the time of the Olympic torch relay before 2008. And, we've seen intimidation where ATC members and supporters have been filmed and photographed at rallies. But I have to say, with this interference, we're unafraid. We'll continue to work on the Tibetan struggle, and in particular, the members of the Tibetan community in Australia are very brave, and they meet this intimidation and this pressure head on. And of course, it's important to think that what we face is nothing compared to the situation in Tibet, where Tibetans are arrested and tortured for making protests about environment or for their human rights. We're always mindful of that, and we know that we have the luxury of living in a free country where we do have legal processes and our freedom of speech is protected. Yeah, so even so, we do face challenges, but of course nothing compared to Tibetans in Tibet.
Dr. Zoë, as you know that Tibetan movement is completely based on non-violent path. So when you look at today's China, how important do you think is the role of middle way approach to solve Tibet's issue and to have a win-win situation?
Yeah, thank you for raising this question. I feel like this is quite a topical issue at the moment. ATC's position is to support the Tibetan people's policies and resolutions on how to resolve the issue with China. The Australian Tibet Council understands that the middle way approach is the position and the policy for the Central Tibetan Administration. And so in that way, it's not up to ATC to decide if this policy should continue or change, because we're a Tibet support group and our role is to support the resolve of Tibetan people. But like I say, I'm not surprised that you've raised this issue now because, after the actions of Chinese authorities in Hong Kong, and we've seen in just the past few years the collapse really of the one country, two systems arrangement in Hong Kong. I can only imagine that there's quite a lot of discussion at the moment about the middle way approach and if it's even possible to continue with this policy given the aggression by China. I think it's always right to assess the way forward and to base it on current circumstances. The middle way approach was such an opportunity for China to resolve the situation in Tibet in a way that allowed for Tibetans to have dignity and autonomy and to be free from oppression and human rights violations. But at this stage, can we say that China has not taken up this opportunity for a win-win solution, as you put it? There's a question there. Is China actually seeking a win-win solution? I think it's a valid question to ask. because the actions of Chinese authorities in Hong Kong and with Uyghurs and in Tibet are only getting more and more oppressive for people, and there's only been more restrictions. It's always right for Tibetans and the movement itself to be assessing what is the best way forward, what is the interest of Tibetan people, and how can we put that at the forefront of our minds and our movement. So ATC is supportive of Tibet's non-violent struggle and will support the will and the resolve of Tibetan people to find a solution that ends the suffering in Tibet and allows Tibetan people to live with freedom and practice their language, culture, and religion with dignity in a way, the best way that they can. That's our role, to support that.
Okay, Dr. Zoë, I would like to end our discussion with this question. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has visited your country many times, and his message on peace, love, and compassion has become more relevant than before. Especially his emphasis on climate crisis is much needed in today's time. And your organization also works on Tibet climate crisis. So tell us about the relevance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's message and your organization's work on Tibet's climate crisis.
Yeah, the Dalai Lama has always been a great advocate for the environment. And I think I first heard the Dalai Lama's environment message back in 1987 when he spoke of, the 5-point peace plan. And in that speech, he talked about Tibetans being the right people to steward the Tibetan environment in a way that would not be destructive of the Tibetan environment, Obviously, since those times, the world has been waking up to the climate crisis, and now is the right time to remind people that Tibet's climate change is a concern for the whole world. ATC has got 2 reports available on our website about the environment, and one's called An Iron Fist in a Green Glove, and it deals with the greenwashing that has occurred in China, where China's, ridding Tibet's grasslands of nomads for supposed environmental protection, when it's in fact the nomads of Tibet who have been the caretakers of that environment for centuries. We have another report called Tibet, an Environmental Challenge, which explores a number of environmental issues facing Tibetan Plateau, including the damming of rivers that carry water to densely populated areas in Asia, like down the Mekong, down the Brahmaputra, and the plans to dam Tibet's sacred rivers such as Yarlung Tsangpo River. Tibet's a water tower of Asia, and the right way forward is to see these issues as global issues. They're not just limited to the issue of, the Tibet struggle. One of the biggest issues, of course, is the big melt, where the Tibet plateau has warmed, with temperatures rising 0.4% per decade since the 1960s. And this is an alarming rate. And the glaciers of Tibet, also known as the Third Pole, have reduced in area by 15% in the past 3 decades. But the important thing is that ATC believes that Tibetan people should be the ones deciding on their environmental policies. This issue ultimately returns to the issue of sovereignty and self-determination. Tibetans should be deciding how to protect the environment, and they should be the ones who are deciding how climate change and the modernization affects the fragile ecosystem of Tibet. Change in these environments can be permanent, and it's not good enough that an occupying power is making permanent and devastating changes to the environment in Tibet today. Today, China violates the rights of Tibetans in part of pretense that it's protecting the environment. China's forcing nomads off their ancestral land, and it's carrying out this false argument that it's necessary to protect the grasslands. And it's true that Tibet's grasslands do need protection, but not from Tibetan people who've been living sustainably on the roof of the world for, a millennia. And respecting the traditional knowledge of Tibetans is an essential part of restoring the grasslands and the rest of Tibet's fragile ecosystem in the future. There needs to be an understanding that environmental protections and the issue of self-determination go hand in hand. And, China is an occupying force in Tibet, and Tibet's fragile ecosystem would be safer when it's in the hands of Tibetans and their voices are being heard, and they are the ones who are being able to decide on environmental policy in the region. We've seen this in environmental movements around the world, whether it's in the Amazon in Brazil, whether it's First Nation peoples in the USA standing up against pipelines. We need to listen to the original people of the land, and in this case, it's Tibetans who should be making decisions for Tibet's future in the climate and not the occupying power of China.
Okay, Dr. Zoë, with this, we're going to end our discussion here. I would like to thank Dr. Zoë for joining our program. Thank you so much, Dr. Zoë.
Thank you for having me.